Rolling one, two.
There's a balloon. Isn't there a thing
Action!
on it? You had us all off there.
Everybody,
there,
just
Tom.
that little bit too relaxed.
Right, Danny, jump season just around the corner. Social media's already getting a frenzy about the jumps. So when does Willie have them back in? Any of the good ones already going away?
They're all back in. They're doing their pre-season flat work. They're in the Sand Arena at the moment. Usually after the Galway Festival is when they start to come into work again. They won't be back out in the wood chip gallop for another few weeks. That'll depend on rain and see how it goes from there.
We'll start with some French juveniles, the ones we don't know anything about, and you can maybe give us a line in. Narcisco Has is one towards the top of the Triumph Hurdle market. Won the same race as Sergino, so obviously social media likes the sound of that.
Yeah, looks a nice horse, and probably very little we can say about him for the moment. You know, he's done no fast work in Willie's, and looks the right article. He's won the right races in France. You know, you'd imagine he's going to be a Triumph Hurdle type, but you know, as the season progresses, it's probably after Christmas when Willie's juveniles really start to appear. So I can't imagine we'll see them pre-Christmas.
Now, I already had a chat with you this morning. I think it was Manita that you said was one you had seen at home, a grey horse.
Yeah, Manita grey looks a nice type, and yeah, I think it was placed maybe around Auteuil as well in one of the better trial races there, and just you know, I'd see her walking out to the gallop and doing her exercise. She looks a nice profile, and you know, there's plenty of them there who fit the similar profile, but she's just, I suppose, being a grey one that catches the eye, something similar to Lossiemouth in the early days. Whether she can live up to that, who knows? And
often they haven't, the one that goes on to win the Triumph Hurdle hasn't even come into Willie Mullins as yet, so I suppose you don't get too excited too early, do you? Or is the whispers about one more than another?
There'll always be a few whispers, I suppose, like the horse that's won Sergino's race is going to be a talking horse until horses start taking each other on and establish the pecking order. Probably for the juveniles, that's established maybe at the Dublin Racing Festival, or there's a good listed race in Fairy House a few weeks before Cheltenham, so you know, that'll be later on, but it's exciting seeing them come true.
And is there any that we haven't seen? We always seem to do press days with Willie before the DRF, and he'll say, we had this horse in last year, but we didn't really push any buttons on him. Is there any of them that you can remember from last season that were working away we haven't really seen? I'm trying to think, maybe like Anzadam was one that got talked a little bit last season, who we then didn't see much of.
Yeah, he was a nice horse. There was chat about Anzadam being a champion hurdle horse, and he looks well this year. He's come back nice again, but he looked very good winning his races last year, but to make that step up, that's very difficult. That, you know, the next maybe 10 pounds or that, to become a proper Grade 1 championship horse, that's quite a difficult step to make. You know, one that we did give a mention to last year was Champ Kylie, and kind of had a stop-start season, but finished off quite well in Punchestown, his first time over 3 miles. I wonder, could he be one that would be under the radar in the likes of a King George? You know, that's maybe a race that fit in well for him.
We'll come on to that in a little bit later because I've got some questions for that. But we'll go through the champion bumper horses. Bambino Fever was obviously the standout one who won the champion bumper. You were 7th. That was Willie's next best one in the champion bumper with Sortudo. How do you see all them taking rank in terms of going hurdling or going into other disciplines or whatever?
Yeah, you know, the champion bumper, it can throw up a few different types. You'd imagine Bambino Fever looks the one for the mayor's novice.
Have you seen her schooling or anything yet?
I haven't seen her school,
No.
but she came from, I think she came from Point to Point yard, so I'd imagine, you know, she's well schooled. I think she's won a Point to Point, so should be no issue through her. Sortudo, well, I thought he might be more competitive in the champion bumper. He got outpaced off the home turn, and from the furlong pole to the finish line, it was quite good the way he stayed on there. So I'd imagine he could be one for the staying novice hurdlers. You know, a bit of test of stamina could really bring out the best in him.
And a couple of the ones I'll just throw at you. Copacaban, Gameofinches, Aqua, then Green Splendour won the Aintree champion bumper. Any idea on where they'll go?
Yeah, I'm sure they'll all go into their novice hurdles, different divisions, and Gameofinches was probably the one that disappointed in Cheltenham. I think Paul rode him in the champion bumper and had won very well in Punchestown. And I think, if he, for whatever went wrong in Cheltenham, if he can get back to the horse that we've seen in Punchestown, there's a chance of him making a Grade 1 novice hurdler. He looked very good that day in Punchestown, so it'll be interesting to see the rest of them. I suppose it comes down to how well and how fast they can jump, and that'll establish their pecking order.
I think Gameofinches is same silks as Final Demand as well.
That's it, yeah. Like the Final Demand is another nice type, ran well behind Skelton's horse in the 2-5 race in Cheltenham last year, and I think Final Demand could be, one that fit the Gold Cup profile of a horse, so he'll be an interesting one going down the novice chase route this season.
Right, now we're going to go on to potential novice chasers, I suppose, and you can tell us whether they weren't, but these were some of the superstars from last season. Kopek Des Bordes, obviously, blew plenty of people away last season.
Yes, he was very good. He settled and jumped a lot better as the season progressed. I think that was always going to be a natural improvement, having not come from a point-to-point background. And the way he finished off last year, you'd imagine he's going to be a top novice chaser. I suppose distance is going to be the thing for him. I'd imagine he might start off near 2 miles, but I could see Willie stepping him up. He's a fine big horse. He'll stay further in time, but I'm sure they'll want to just keep the lid on him as the season goes on.
Excellent. And we've mentioned Final Demand already. Jasmin De Vaux was another Cheltenham Festival winner.
Jasmin De Vaux, very good ride from Paul Townend to win the Albert Bartlett. Jumping again was a bit slow over hurdles, but I think that could be okay over fences. When he got in tight to a hurdle, he was just awkward at using himself, where he's got that bit more time to get up into the air over fences. You'd imagine how well he stayed last year. He could be one for the likes of the National Hunt Chase or something like that, RSA, or these are the type of races you'd imagine he'll go for, and watch how he goes. I think there won't be an issue, but it's watching his jumping in the early part of the year is going to be the main thing.
And a couple of other runners from the Supreme. Kargese was fourth, and Salvatore Mundi, who was a big talking horse. I think when we come just before the DRF to speak to, he was sort of being banded as the #1 novice hurdler at the time, but didn't turn out to be that way in the end. Yeah,
Salvatore Mundi was probably his own worst enemy. Getting to settle was the thing for him, and so with fences in front of him, a 2 mile chase is 12 fences compared to a 2 mile hurdle is only 8 hurdles, so that should really get him to come back on his hocks and settle a bit more. And fingers crossed. It'll be just watching how he is mentally. The physical engine is there, but mentally is the big thing for Salvatore Mundi.
Excellent stuff. We'll go on to some of the more established ones, and I think the one who has the oddest personality but still seems to turn up on the big days is Gaelic Warrior.
Gaelic Warrior, yes. He, always promised and maybe failed to deliver a few times. Was good towards the end of the season. Patrick gave him a great ride to win in Aintree, I think it was, over 3 miles, and that's probably opened up a few doors for him. Yeah. If he can switch off in those 3 mile races, he could be quite a classy horse at that distance. And
think he's a Gold Cup horse?
It would open the door, now that he's a bit more mature, and if he's going to settle and jump and relax through a race, there is the option of a Gold Cup horse where he won an Arkle on heavy ground but was never really a 2 miler. I think class brought him through that day. So now that he's settling, the Gold Cup could be an option, or he could fit into the Ryanair. Fact of File was a Ryanair winner last year, the JP McManus Silks. He's in the Rich Ritchie Silks, so that you could see those two take each other on in that race.
Why you've mentioned that, where do you think all of them will be campaigned? Gaelic Warrior, Fact to file, obviously, whether he stays Ryanair or goes Gold Cup, and Galopin Des Champs, he's obviously still the class act of the three out of all of them. He's been there and bought the T-shirt, but they're all going to bang out at some point.
Yeah, you wonder how they all fit in again. And, you know, while Fact to File was a very good winner of the Ryanair last year, if Gavin Cromwell's horse, I like the way you're thinking, is it?
Yeah.
Is the one that won the Gold Cup. If he stays on the Gold Cup route, you'd imagine Fact to File will stay Ryanair, and then you're wondering what way the rest will fit in after that. It is trying to just peel it back to who owns what and what horses want to take each other on.
I'm going to move on to another division, but Majborough probably took every fence in Cheltenham at the festival, but prior to that, the DRF looked an absolute superstar. So where does the future lie, do you think, for him?
Majborough is probably one that's somewhat like Gaelic Warrior, huge talent, but mentally a bit fragile at times. And you know, he went back after a blowout in Cheltenham. He went back to win quite well in Punchestown, and you know, being a year older is going to be a big help to him. You know, he was a very strong juvenile and won quite well in the Triumph, where going straight in, you know, was he only a 5-year-old running in the Arkle, he probably thought he was a bit ahead of himself there. So if he can learn to relax, I still think he has a chance of making it in the Champion Chase division. But, you know, I think that's probably a division that's opened up somewhat now. John Bon was the rock-solid horse of that, and the chat from the Henderson camp seems to be that they'll try longer distances with him this year.
What about Marine Nationale in that division?
Marine Nationale, you know, very good winning the Champion Chase last year. Barry Connell done a good job prepping him to just land there for Cheltenham, and you know, he's a very good winner of the race. And you know, around Cheltenham, I suppose he's setting the standard. John Bon doesn't bring it to Cheltenham, so we'll see if something can match him in Cheltenham. But I don't think you see the best of Marine Nationale early winter until you're getting into the likes of Cheltenham.
We'll go to some 2-milers, obviously. State Man, Lossiemouth didn't end up taking each other on at Cheltenham Festival. Went and picked up their own, well, State Man didn't, but Lossiemouth went on to win a race there. How do you see that sort of division? That's wide open just as much as the Champion Chase is, surely?
It's wide open, you know. State Man Barra Fall was a 2-time winner of a Champion Hurdle, and while he's getting a year older, he probably still sets the standard. Constitution Hill didn't quite look himself, while State Man was able to bounce back from the disappointment at Christmas. So it's probably opened up the door for a novice to come out and lay a claim to the Champion Hurdle crown, but they'll have to get to State Man's standard. But that standard, as they get years older, probably dips somewhat.
Do you think Lossiemouth could drop back to the Champion Hurdle?
I think Lossiemouth could drop back to the Champion Hurdle, you know, but for the fall in Leopardstown last year, the end of her season could have been a lot different, and you know, she proved herself again in the mare's race, and I'd say Willie will be assessing how the season goes early. You know, she gained a lot of confidence after a few defeats, like she got a fall in Leopardstown, she got beat in Kempton, and gained that confidence back at the end of the season, and she's probably put herself in a position where she could have a go at the Champion Division again.
Just on that, but away from Willie's, Constitution Hill, a lot of people have said retire him, put him over fences, call it a day, go on the flat, whatever. What would you do if you were an advisor in the Henderson camp? You've been a jockey on him. What would you be saying to do after what we've seen so far, well, particularly last season?
Yeah, Constitution Hill. I suppose the cleverest thing to do if you're an advisor in the Henderson camp would be listen to Nicky.
Yeah.
He's just a master at bringing back these horses. Like what he did with Sprinter Sacra was unbelievable. And you know, Constitution Hill fell in Cheltenham, fell in Aintree, and he was obviously showing enough that they wanted to come to Punchestown, so the spark must be still there.
You think he will be?
I can't see a reason as to how it's going to be there, but you just can't doubt Nicky Henderson. You know, if he's seen something at home, he's had a summer break, he's had time to recover from a few of those mishaps on his day, he's a brilliant horse. I don't think it'll happen, but it'd be foolish to say that it's guaranteed he's not coming back.
Definitely. A couple of other ones to go through back in the Mullins camp. Kargese.
Kargese, yeah, she'd have the mare's option, but I think a race that could really suit Kargese is the Arkle. You know, she's such a good jumper. Her jumping probably allowed her to get into positions where she didn't settle well enough to be as a juvenile hurdler. She ended up on a nice mark to go and win the county hurdle last year, and you know, with a mare's allowance, if she can jump and travel the way we've seen in her juvenile days, if she can do that in an Arkle, I think she could be hard to beat.
Excellent. What about Murcia, who went on to win a Grade 1?
Yeah, Murcia won the Grade 1 in Aintree, and yeah, looks a solid type. I don't know if she's big enough to go chasing, so you'd imagine she might go down the route of the mare's hurdle. Also owned by Kenny Alexander, who has Jade de Grugy in that division as well. So it'll be seeing where they can fit in, and you know, maybe Jade de Grugy goes mare's hurdle. Does Murcia have a look at the Aintree hurdle 2.5 mile race as well? Another Grade 1. You'd see what way they'll pan out through the season. Another
one of them mares, Dinoblue, who's been rock solid in that division. Where do you think? Just the same type of route for her again?
That's it, you know, a good mare, solid, turns up and does her thing, and you'd imagine it'll be mare's chase, and Cheltenham will be her main target.
And two more from Cheltenham, one that you rode, Jimmy de Seuil, and then Lecky Watson, two sort of like outsiders for Mullins that I suppose won. Where do you think Jimmy will go for a start?
Jimmy de Seuil, I suppose he's difficult to place this year. How does he fit in? And, you know, he might lack a little bit of the speed for a champion hurdler, but he might have too much class for an Albert Bartlett. So does he look like, you know, your horse for the likes of the Hatton's Grace earlier in the year, and looking then towards, you know, the spring festivals? Is the Aintree hurdle another option for him? Those 2.5 mile intermediate distances looks to be his optimum trip. I'm sure Willie might have a go to or fro with 2 miles or 3 miles before then, but I think he looks a high class 2.5 miler where it might just be a little bit weak in either division, but if he comes back stronger, it's open to him.
And what about the green machine that you nicely named? Where will we see him turning up?
Yeah, the little green machine, Etait Temps. He, I'm sure, will be sticking to the 2 mile division. He's got good form. He's won over 2.5 around Aintree and ran well behind Gaelic Warrior over 2.5 in Limerick. So you could see the likes of the Clonmel Oil could be a starting point for him. Cheltenham hasn't been where you've seen the best of them, but I think that's more so ground rather than Cheltenham. I think if you got a bit of nice ground for a champion chase, he'd be bang in the mix. He's shown on multiple occasions he's well good enough to do it, but being a horse that's a little bit smaller than the stereotype champion chaser, a bit of good ground really brings out the best of him.
Alex Ferguson always said about his footballers, he'd look him in the eye and see who wanted it again next season. Do you get that impression with Galopin Des Champs? He's been beat, but Willie doesn't seem the type of man that then just gives up after that.
No, he seems to be a horse that's well able to bounce back, and he's been beaten plenty of times before. You know, in Punchestown, John Durkin, he's got beat at the start of the season, and you know, he tailed off last season with a nice win, but he's been beat there at the end of the season before, and always comes back, you know, to show his true colours again. And he is older, and you know, Cromwell's horse is going to give him lots to think about, but I think Galopin will still be bang there fighting out the Gold Cup. Who knows if it's a difficult thing to do to regain the Gold Cup crown. Was it Cotto Star was the only one to do it in recent years, so difficult but not impossible for Galopin Des Champs.